You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. How can accessing our inner wisdom revolutionize our approach to well-being? Find out more in this episode. This episode contains strong language and listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore a deeper, more fulfilling way of living that goes beyond simply going through the motions of everyday life. We delve into how connecting with inner wisdom can transform approaches to health, happiness, and personal growth. Claire Smedley has been a lifelong seeker around the topic of what it is to live a fulfilling, healthy, and purpose-driven life. She blends all the effective tools she has acquired along the way into a comprehensive coaching and mentoring program that focuses on the whole person. She spent almost 20 years as a yoga teacher and trainer in the US and the UK. She's a qualified pause breathwork facilitator and I rest yoga nidra meditation teacher, helping her clients navigate the murky waters of the subconscious mind in a gentle, inquiring, and trauma-informed way. Being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, she pivoted to retrain as an integrative nutrition health coach and an autoimmune paleo coach. This led to her first book, Nutrition, New Story, New You Cookbook, to support people making the dietary changes that had been so healing for her and the many other women she coached. Her latest book, Living from the Inside Out, is a return to the wisdom traditions of yoga, brought right up to date with science, a unique female perspective, and peppered through with personal anecdotes and practical tips. The book forms the foundation of her unique approach to coaching, helping midlife women get their oomph back. Here is my interview with Claire Smedley. Hi, Claire. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because living from the inside out sounds like a really fascinating topic for today. I'm really excited to dive into that with you. Thanks for being here today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Petra. It's an absolute privilege to be here and I'm really excited to be talking on this topic with you today.
Yeah, something really important, right? Because living from the inside out, as that suggests, is a bit of a perspective shift for many people, I think. So that'll be really great to chat about that. So do you want to start us off with a little bit about your own story and where you've been, what you've come through, and what you do today? That would be really fascinating as well.
Okay, sure. So I'm 54. I'm a mother of one grown-up son. I was always a bit of a science nerd at school. And after motherhood, I became a yoga teacher. So I decided to step out of the corporate world into something a little bit more holistic. Took up yoga for myself, and it made such a huge impact on me. I was struggling with some depression, postnatal depression at the time. And because it made such a massive impression on me, I decided to train as a yoga teacher. I ended up doing that for almost 20 years, teaching yoga, teaching meditation. I had a teacher training school, full-time job, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then we moved to South Africa from the UK, and I decided it was time for something fresh, something new. And it was while I was there that I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's. And looking back, the signs were there for a long time. I was kind of ignoring them like most people do. And I was told by the doctor that there was nothing that could be done. It was genetic. I would just have to take medication for the rest of my life. And that didn't seem true for me. It didn't sit right with me. So I said to my doctor, give me 6 weeks. I'm going to look at alternatives, see what I can find, and I'll come back to you. So I dived in, read as much as I could. I discovered the autoimmune paleo diet, which I followed religiously, and it completely took my symptoms away, all of them, from fatigue, weight gain, hair loss, irritable bowel syndrome, the lot, just all went. So I thought, oh, I'm onto something here. I went back and I had all my bloods tested again, and sure enough, everything had come down into normal range. Hooray! You'd think my doctor would be interested to know what I'd done. No, nothing. So you'll see a theme that comes through here. Because I'd had such a great healing response myself, I decided to retrain, and I became a health coach specializing in autoimmune diseases in women and using this diet to help them. It's not just food, it's also stress management too. So it pulled on my yoga background. And so then I became this health coach. I wrote a book on this to help people avoid some of the pitfalls of changing diet and some of the mindset shifts that we might need. And it's a cookbook as well with, all my favorite recipes. So you don't have to eat lettuce and feel deprived. So that was book one. We then left South Africa and we moved to Thailand during COVID, which was intense to say the least. And working with clients with their food and their health, I just kept coming up against the same issues in people over and over again. There was so much either hidden trauma, there'd been trauma right before they got sick. So maybe loss of a loved one, divorce, something, impactful. And in some people, there wasn't that. There wasn't trauma with a capital T, but there was maybe some really limiting beliefs that were sabotaging them and holding them back from becoming the full person that they were here to be. And so the more I work with people, I realized you can't just work with the body. And, my 20 years as a yoga and meditation teacher, I should have been ahead of the game with this anyway, but I started to put the pieces together, and it brought back to mind a model from my yoga philosophy studies. It's about 2,500 years old. It's called the kosher model. And I love it because it's simple. It reminds us that we are a soul. We came here as a soul to have an experience, a unique experience that nobody else has had because no one's been you. And that soul is encased in this mind body that we get to explore and navigate the world through. And this mind body has 5 layers. So from the inside out, we start with joy. Then we have the subconscious mind. Then we have the conscious mind, the thinking mind. Then we have the energy field and our emotions. And then we have the physical body. And the physical body is where we experience all of it. So, if you have a job interview, you get a physical response around nerves in the tummy. You get butterflies. Yeah. So everything we're thinking, everything we're feeling, we experience in the body. And so by tinkering around with the body with things like nutrition, you start to see that there's other stuff playing here as well. And the way I work with people now is we look at all 5 layers. We don't just look at the physical body. We've got to address the emotions. We've got to address, what your mind is focusing on all of the time. What is your history and how is it showing up still today running the show? But most importantly of all, are you connected to that most fundamental central layer of yourself, which is, do you experience joy? Do you experience creativity? Curiosity, spontaneity, love? Do you follow your interests or do you conform? Because if we're always conforming, we can never have true health, because there's a whole dimension of the most important dimension of ourselves that we're not tapped into. And so now I help people get back, not just their physical health and great gut health, but their intrinsic sense of meaning, purpose, and their joie de vivre, and the joy for life itself. So that's it in a nutshell, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I hear so many pieces of what you went through and what you do for work. And there seems to be almost an epidemic just on that today in the world, that people have become very disconnected with that joy inside themselves, with their passion, with their purpose. And they're living life a little bit on autopilot, just trying to make it through, just surviving. And it's not really surprising to me that ends up sometimes in chronic conditions, chronic illness, or some kind of disease, or feeling unwell. Because as you said, there's those 5 layers, and if we don't address them all, there's going to be imbalance. So that makes actually a lot of sense to me as well. So how do you work with people then when we consider all of these 5 layers? How do you bring all that together when you work with your clients?
First of all, it's recognizing that every single person is unique. And so the way I'm going to work with them will be unique. Even though I use the same framework, some people may need to really address their physical health. Maybe there's been neglect of, nourishment, movement, sleep. Maybe they've got some toxins. And, it's like having the body is like the theatre, and your life is the play that's being acted in the theatre. So you want the theatre to be beautiful and strong and robust so that the play can, be at its best. So for some people, that's where we'll begin. For other people, they're completely disconnected from their emotions. Maybe they grew up in a house where emotions were not allowed, or expressing emotions were not allowed. And so they've learned not to. But our emotions are our messengers. They tell us how we really feel in this moment. They also give us some indication of the stories behind why we feel that way in this moment. Other people, they're constantly focusing perhaps on the negative story. And so we can use tools like meditation to help them focus on something else, to open up to a new perspective and a new potential and new reality. And then digging around in the subconscious layer. So I do something called subconscious journeying, which is a co-meditation. And when we park the conscious thinking mind, which likes to speak in words, we get access to the subconscious, and that likes to speak in pictures and feelings. And it can take you on almost like a dreamlike movie that you are a character in, but it always ends up in a place of absolute peace and clarity, because you're clearing away the stories. The things that come up to be seen and experienced are showing you what's actually running the show right now. So lots of different ways we work. Like I said, we work with addressing the physical body, the emotions. I like to use breath work for. That's one of the most powerful ways of accessing emotional regulation, nervous system regulation, and also inviting people in a very held way to even taste into some of the old trauma, and how we can start to release that by literally drip by drip, bringing new feelings up to be felt. It's safe, and then they can go on their way. So depending on what the person needs, we'll start on one of those layers. I nearly always give people a gratitude practice to do, because it's the best and quickest way to break down our negativity bias, which we all have. We're designed to survive in places like South Africa, where lions do really want to come and eat you. I used to have lions sleeping in the driveway, so I used to watch them, and it was very relevant. Okay, we don't have lions maybe on our commute to work, but we have a boss, we have a job we want to keep, all of these pressures that make us feel unsafe. And so we want to be able to address what comes up in ourself when we feel threatened, because those instances are only supposed to happen for a second or two. Contrary to what you see on the nature shows, antelopes aren't bumping into lions every 5 minutes. They may see a lion once in 3 months. And so they'll get that jolt of energy to run like the clappers away from danger. And then when they're out of danger, it all calms down again. But now we're getting those jolts 5, 6, 7, 10 times a day. And our body responds in exactly the same way. So, having a gratitude practice to stop us constantly being on the lookout for the lion is a tool I do give to everybody.
Yeah, I feel like gratitude is one of those things that if you are working with gratitude, it's hard to have anything else in your mind at the time that you're doing the practice. It's really helpful in focusing you on the present moment and what you are experiencing. Yeah. Now, I know that a lot of us come to this after something has happened. So in your case, you have a diagnosis of an autoimmune. Some other people have, maybe injuries or illnesses, something that has really changed and impacted their lives. So how do we find motivation to actually do this when we're not ill and when it hasn't come to that point yet? Because these practices are helpful even before that happens. We should all have those in our lives. So how do you work with clients that might kind of say to you, well, I'm not ill, I feel actually good. I feel okay. Why should I be doing this? So what are some of these motivational things that you can speak to for yourself or your clients on that?
I'm probably going to be slightly controversial and say, until you've hit the floor, you won't find the motivation to change. You've got to want it. And then motivation lasts about 3 weeks. So if you're trying to force from your mind and your mind's agenda a new reality for your life, you're kind of starting in the middle of yourself. You're starting in layer 3 from the model that I use, your mind. And how many times have you tried to force change from that space, and how many times has it been successful? So I'll be totally honest with you. These tools have really pulled me out of pits in my life, more than once. And when I'm pulled out of the pit and I'm fine again, I still do those practices. And then maybe I go on holiday and I stop doing them. And then I come back home and I think, well, I'll get back into it again. And then I get distracted. And all of a sudden I'm feeling like I'm drifting down into a pit again. Oh my goodness, why am I here again? And I realize I haven't been doing the things that keep me out of the pit. I think sometimes you have to go through that a few times to realize the value of the tools you're using. So now I don't allow myself to miss more than one day. That's the first thing. So if you're doing gratitude practice, meditation, going for a daily walk, whatever it is, don't beat yourself up if you miss one day, because you don't need to bully yourself. Just make a promise that tomorrow you'll do it. So if you end up doing it every other day, that's amazing. That's going to help keep you on track to where you want to be. So self-punishment won't get you there. It's never got you there yet, and it never will. Force with your agenda isn't going to get you there either. So tapping back into a deep truth that a lot of people want to push away, which is, what do you want? What do you love? Are you doing enough of that? And I'm not saying you have to quit your whole life because you actually want to be a florist and do flower arranging for the rest of your life. And, you've got bills to pay and children at school and blah, blah. But if floristry is your passion, are you spending some time every day, even if it's just 10 minutes, indulging in that passion? Because if you do, that will give you more energy and more fuel than caffeine, sugar, and all of the other crutches that we reach for when our energy is low. When our energy is low, it's a sign that we're disconnected. We're doing stuff because we think we have to do that stuff. Even your healing practice can be something you tick off on your to-do list. How do you make it meaningful? How do you make it in service of that? Because then you're going to love doing it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad to know that you feel that same way, because there are many times where I didn't do yoga practices or all the things, that I had planned to do. I started feeling awful again. And then I went back to it and did a few rounds of that over the years, until I came to realize that it needs to be a consistent part of my life. But you're right, there has to be an experience that we go through in order to really appreciate those kind of things and how they actually change our lives. So yeah, that's a really great point. And it can be difficult because if you are already stressed out and you already have a really full plate, it can feel like adding those practices will add more stress because now you have to make time for those. You have to find this extra 20 minutes, half hour, whatever you're doing. But in the end, it comes down to that whole experience, right? Does it actually bring you more health, more joy, more of what it is that you're looking for in life? So yeah, wonderfully put. Now, how can people get started with this? I know that when we say yoga and meditation, a lot of people are like, wow, I'm not flexible. I'm not skinny. I'm not this. I'm not that. I can't do yoga. And meditation is sometimes scary because a lot of people tell me when they have experienced a lot of trauma or stress that sitting in stillness can actually cause a huge panic for them. So where do we start with this when we've come to the realization that we do need something in our lives, something needs to change, we would like a practice? What's best on how to start off with this?
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because not all tools are for all people. For some, asking somebody with a lot of trauma to sit with themselves in silence on their own can re-traumatize. The same with breath work on their own can re-traumatize. So if that is your history, I would say to those people, work with somebody who is trained in really deep observation and can help you stay within a safe space with it as you progress. But the things that everyone can start with, we've already touched on the gratitude practice, but is to ask yourself, what do you love to do? And I come back to this again because this is the first layer. What did you love to do as a child? Because no child will spend time doing something they don't enjoy unless they're forced to. So there's clues in there. What did you love to do as a child? Now, for me, for example, when I was a child, I loved make-believe. I loved dressing up. I loved acting. I loved reading. I was a voracious reader. I loved maths. I was a nerd. Like I said, I was a real science nerd. And so now as a 54-year-old, if I was to look at that and say, well, what can I mine from that to do today? Well, am I reading every day? If reading is a passion, I need to do it daily. What am I curious about? What am I learning about? I was always a lifelong learner. So if I'm not learning something, I get really flat and stale. I love an audience. So I love doing things like podcasts and being guests on podcasts and talking about these things with like-minded people. So the first thing I would say to people is, are you doing the things you've always loved doing? Or have you said, that was childhood, now I'm an adult, I've got to be serious and I've got to have a profession and I've got to be this, and this, which I absolutely hate. Not to say you can't still be all those roles, but you have to be you as well. And I'll tell you, if you can find something and tap into it that you really love to do, you will be a better employee, you will be a better boss, you will be a better parent, because you will bring the best of you to it, not the leftovers. So that's where I would begin almost everybody. Tap into what you love to do as a child, and are you still doing it?
Yeah, that's actually a great point because, believe it or not, I think a lot of us also feel guilty to do the things that we enjoy doing because we feel like it's not really contributing to making money or doing chores or whatever it is that we expect of ourselves. And so if we take the time to just put our feet up and read a book for 20 minutes, it feels like we're not doing our job or taking care of the family or whatever it is that we're setting as expectations. So I feel like just from listening to you that actually it shouldn't be a point of guilt when we are doing these things that fill us up, because it's a necessity for us to be healthy and feel well to actually do those things that bring us joy. How do you deal with that with your clients when they say, well, Claire, I can't just put my feet up and read a book. My husband's going to look at me all funny. My kids need me. How do you deal with those feelings that come up that we might not actually really deserve or shouldn't be taking that time for ourselves?
Yeah. So this is a really, really common response, especially in women. I think as women, we're raised from very young, literally from when we're born, that we will be all things to all people. We will yield for others. We will yield for men. If you think about a dynamic where, say a married couple, man and a woman, the man gets a promotion to move halfway around the world, chances are the whole family will follow. If the mother does, that's often a different discussion because we're so often conditioned to be the yielders. And so I really respect people when they say, oh, but it's selfish, I feel guilty. And we have to be with those feelings. So this is one of the things that I might bring breath work into, being with the feelings of both guilt and also its opponent, which might be freedom or permission, and how we can actually use the breath to call in new emotions that are unfamiliar. So if you've never been one to give yourself permission, then we need to explore where permission lives in our body. What does it feel like in our body? Can we allow it to grow? Can we breathe and make it expand without having to make guilt wrong? Because guilt isn't wrong. Guilt has a function. And so that we can be fluid in our emotions rather than living entirely from one emotion. So the first thing is to really honor it. The second is to try exploring its opponent, its opposite. And then the subconscious journeying. Well, okay, let's dive into this. Where does this come from? Who gave you this belief? And what does it really want to show you? And then we can explore, what is the opposite belief? So again, using opposition, what is the opposite belief? And if that were true right now, where does that live in my body? And can I get used to that as an unfamiliar new experience? And then toggling between opposites so that if we're very fixed in either a belief or an emotion, it's like a rock. That's my experience and it always has been. When you can start to bring in its opponent, it loosens because, actually, it's not all black. There's also white. It's not all heat. There's also cool. And we start to realize that these move, and I can actually move in between them, and I can even hold them both together at the same time. And when we can hold them both together, that's holistic. That is integrative. So it's integrating two opponents to make a whole, yin and yang. And then there is completion, there is fullness, there is expansion from there, which is why I say when people go through a subconscious journey, they feel expansive at the end because they're no longer fixed in just one thing. They've explored opposition and they realize that they're all of it. There's a time when guilt is right. If you neglect your children and you don't feed them because you want to go to yoga and they're 6 years old and you've left them alone, damn right you should feel guilty. But if it's, they're 16, 17, they can fend for themselves for half an hour or an hour, there's no reason for guilt. And that guilt is blocking you from being the person that you came here to be.
Yeah, that's an important exploration for each person to kind of take on their own and find what works for them, what's right for them. Yeah, wonderful. Now, you work with clients on various kind of issues and challenges. So how can people work with you, Claire, if they've listened to this episode and this is really interesting to them and they'd like to find out more? How do you work with people? What kind of programs and services do you offer? You've written books. What are they called? Let our audience know how they can find you.
Sure. So the nutrition book is called Nutrition, New Story, New You Cookbook. And the second book, which is about these 5 layers, is called Living from the Inside Out. So instead of reacting to life coming at us, we are creating from inside. And it'll guide you through that and with very practical things to do as well. So as a first step, pick up a book and see if it works for you as a tool. You can come to my website, which is clairesmedley.co.uk. And on there, I talk a little bit more about how I work and my background. I work one-on-one with people. in a very bespoke way, like I've said. Some people need the physical guidance. Some people need the emotional guidance. Some people more the subconscious stuff. I also run periodically group programs where we tap into our purpose, do a 30-day program where we dive deep, we excavate why the heck you're here, because no one else can be you, only you, and how to bring that to life in all areas of your life, not just career, but also your family life, your relationships, your private life with yourself, the things that you do just for you. So those run periodically, and I have a wait list for that, so people can join the wait list from the website and they'll be first to hear when that's next happening. I also run a group once a month, a group breathwork session. It's an hour and a quarter long. So if people are curious about breathwork, but they've never done it, they can come and join me on Zoom, and from the privacy of their own home, they've got to go anywhere, they can come and experience a meditative breath session. So that's mostly how I work, one-on-one, small groups, and these monthly breathwork sessions. But certainly I'll start with the books to get a feel for how I work and a bit of my personality. I like to bring lots of personal stories in my writing, so keep it as real as possible.
Yeah, I love the authenticity about that. So thank you for sharing that. And of course, we will be linking to all of Claire's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there for links on where you can buy her books. We're going to link to those, how you can find her programs and the monthly breath work so that you have lots of resources to connect with. And if you want to eventually work with Claire, then you can connect with her on that as well. And I just want to thank you for being here today, Claire. I found that I've learned so much again in this half hour that we spent together, and fascinating, and all the different aspects and ways that we can find to really bring out our innate healer that's inside each and every one of us, and the different ways that we can do that. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom and your journey with us. I truly appreciate it. And it has been a wonderful time chatting with you today.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk about this all day, every day.
Yeah, I feel like there could be another episode in there somewhere. So we'll see what we come up with for the next one. I feel like there's much more to still talk about.
Absolutely. We could talk for a long, long time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Claire, and take good care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.